It was Mikey's bachelor party, and the plan was simple: get drunk, act like idiots, and hope nobody ends up in a cast or jail. Vegas? Too cliché. Instead, we picked an old-school amusement park by the lake, roller coasters, cotton candy, beer in plastic cups, and the kind of greasy food that guarantees heartburn. I was in a good mood, which lately had been a rare beast. The guys were howling at some rigged ring toss game, and I had just crushed a corn dog like it owed me money. I was laughing, feeling loose for the first time in weeks, when I saw the sign. Neon purple and gold, blinking like a bad decision at 2 a.m., Madame Verona, fortune teller. The guys elbowed each other and decided we needed to mess with the universe. Just for kicks. Probably Mikey's idea. He always had a talent for turning beer courage into bad ideas. We stumbled into the tent smelling like cheap hops and barbecue sauce, and just as I was about to make a joke about tarot cards and incense, she locked eyes with me. "Sylvester," she said, not asking, just saying it, like she already knew. I froze mid-laugh. My name's not printed anywhere. She beckoned me closer like she was reeling in a fish that already knew it was caught. She started listing things. Not vague, horoscope fluff, facts. The scar on my right knee from a skateboard crash in 7th grade. The old Pontiac I drove in college with no AC and a trunk full of regrets. The year my dad died and I didn't cry until 3 months later while fixing a leaking sink. I stared, mouth dry, heart beginning to stutter. The guys quieted down behind me. Then she leaned in, lowered her voice, and dropped a line that made my stomach turn inside out: "Those children aren't yours. Their father visits often. Sometimes when you're working late." I blinked. Laughed. Too loud, too forced. I turned to the guys and said something about charlatans and tourist traps. Told them she probably Googled me or overheard us talking. They laughed nervously, and we backed out of the tent like we were escaping a prank gone too far. But inside, my guts were doing somersaults. Because here's the thing, my youngest has brown eyes. Mine are green. So are my wife's. I always chalked it up to some distant relative, a throwback gene. Except I also once found a receipt for a lunch spot near her work, 2 people, Valentine's Day, when she said she packed her lunch that day. I never confronted her. I wanted to believe in peace more than in truth. But now, this woman with her gaudy scarves and eerily specific knowledge had ripped the blindfold off with surgical precision. I kept smiling, joking with the guys, pretending I wasn't mentally sprinting through the last 5 years of my life. The way she guards her phone. How she suddenly started insisting on date nights, as if to balance some cosmic scale. The way the neighbor Mike always makes eye contact with her and avoids it with me. We rode more rides, laughed more, drank more. I let Mikey puke behind the bumper cars while pretending not to be replaying the fortune teller's voice on loop. I didn't say anything to the guys. You don't drop nuclear truth bombs at a bachelor party. But when I got home, I stared at my kids sleeping like they were strangers in my house. I noticed things. The little mannerisms that didn't match mine. The way the oldest clenches her jaw when she's angry, just like the neighbor's wife. That night, I lay beside my wife pretending to sleep while she typed something quietly on her phone, her screen facing the wall. I'm not saying I believed the fortune teller outright. I'm just saying I finally stopped lying to myself. And the joke? It wasn't on her. It wasn't on me. The joke was that I needed a neon-lit sideshow to tell me what I already knew but didn't have the guts to face. The truth wasn't in the cards. It was written in my silence. In all the times I swallowed doubt to keep the peace. I convinced myself the woman in the tent was just playing some drunk man's ego like a violin. We were a bunch of loud idiots at a bachelor party, and I figured she probably heard me talking on the phone or caught something from the way I walked. Maybe she saw my wedding ring and guessed the rest. My name. Maybe it slipped out when I was ordering drinks, and I didn't notice. That's the thing about tricks, they don't need to be magical, just well-timed. I told myself this 100 times on the ride home, over and over, until it stuck like gum under my shoe. Lily and I had built a simple life. I worked. She stayed home. We didn't live large, but we lived stable. Our roles were clear from the start. I paid for everything, every trip to the grocery store, every doctor appointment, every art supply for the kids, every birthday gift she got her sister. It was my card, my account, and I saw every transaction, every sandwich at the cafe, every Uber ride to the supermarket, every dollar spent at the bookstore. Lily wasn't one of those women sneaking around in boutiques. She didn't even like surprises. She made lists. Lists for groceries, for house projects, for school events. I'd find them everywhere, on the fridge, on the counter, even in the laundry sometimes. She used to send me texts just to remind me about milk, or ask what kind of cereal the kids liked last week. She was consistent, predictable in a way that felt like home. She never had a job after the twins were born. Said it didn't feel right letting someone else raise them, not when we could afford her being there. I agreed. I worked a steady job in logistics, good hours, decent pay, benefits. I was never late with bills. Never missed a birthday. And I never saw anything that felt off. She didn't dress fancy. She didn't suddenly get a gym membership. There were no surprise lunches downtown, no cab charges in the middle of the day, no strange hotel names in the credit history. Her location always matched the house unless she was at her mother's or the school. She even left her phone lying around. If I picked it up to check the time or the weather, she never flinched. She used the same passcode since we got matching phones 3 years ago. And the kids, well, they worshipped her. I'd come home and find them climbing on her lap like puppies. She knew their teachers' names, their shoe sizes, every one of their friends' parents. She managed it all with a kind of quiet strength that I admired. We had routines, dinner at 6, homework at 7, stories by 8. On weekends we went to the park or watched movies. Once a month we did a big grocery haul, and she'd plan meals 2 weeks ahead. If there was a colder person on earth to accuse of betrayal, I hadn't met them. So I decided to snap out of it. I told myself I was being ridiculous, letting some roadside psychic mess with my head. That's the thing with doubt, it only needs one crack. But I patched it with logic. There was no evidence, no trail. No text messages I hadn't seen, no credit card charges that didn't belong, no shifts in behavior. No perfume I didn't recognize, no late-night walks, no unexplained absences. Even the neighbors never hinted at anything strange. We lived in a quiet neighborhood where nothing exciting happened. She didn't go on girls' trips. She didn't disappear for hours. She didn't post vague quotes online. Her phone background was a picture of our youngest making a mess with finger paint. Her browser history was full of recipe blogs and discount codes. I decided to laugh the whole thing off. Put it behind me. Focus on work, focus on the kids, stop being dramatic. She was the kind of woman who cried over animal rescue videos and made sure our dog had joint supplements. I figured, if anything, I was the one falling short. I was tired lately. I worked late sometimes. Maybe I was projecting. Maybe I needed to be more present, more affectionate. Maybe I was just getting older and scared of losing something that had been stable for too long. So I moved on. I made a plan to take her out that weekend. No reason, just us. Thought I'd surprise her. I called her mom to babysit the kids, booked a nice restaurant, and even picked up a new shirt on the way home. She was in the kitchen when I walked in, apron on, hair up, same soft smile as always. And then I saw it. Just a flash. A detail. Something so small it could have been nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not to me. I was locking the car door when I noticed him. Across the street, standing on his front porch like he was frozen in thought, the neighbor with the red truck and the two Labradors, Mr. Kelson. He was looking toward our yard, eyes fixed on Lily and the kids. The kids were playing by the mailbox, their voices bouncing through the quiet street, and Lily was kneeling down, wiping something from our youngest's cheek. It should have been an ordinary scene, but something about the way he stared made my skin tighten. I raised my hand and gave him a casual wave. Nothing dramatic, just neighborly courtesy. He didn't wave back. He didn't even nod. Just turned his head like someone had called him, walked back inside, and closed the door behind him. It was strange, not enough to sound the alarm, but just enough to stick in the back of my mind. Still, I shook it off. People act weird sometimes. Maybe he had a headache. Maybe he was zoning out. I walked over, took Lily by the hand, and said we were due for a night out. She smiled, told her mom we wouldn't be long, and off we went. I had picked a quiet little spot by the lake, nothing fancy, just a place where the food's solid and the view's better. She wore a blue dress I hadn't seen in a while, the one with the sleeves that always made her arms look delicate. We talked about school projects, upcoming birthdays, how fast the kids were growing. For a moment, it felt like old times. Comfortable, warm, safe. She laughed when I made a joke about the waiter's mustache, and I let myself believe that maybe everything really was just in my head. Then her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Something came up, urgent business meeting out of town, had to leave immediately. Said the kids were fine, but we should come pick them up. It was abrupt, sure, but her mom was like that, old school, punctual, always running a tight schedule. We paid the bill and left. Her mother lived about 20 minutes outside the city, in one of those quiet neighborhoods filled with roses, bird feeders, and porch swings. When we got there, the house was locked up tight. The kids were sitting on the couch, cartoons flickering in the background, and her mother had already left. A note on the counter said there were leftovers in the fridge and that she'd call in the morning. I was helping Lily pack up the kids' stuff, backpacks, lunchboxes, coloring books, and I accidentally knocked over a plastic storage box that had been left beside the hallway table. Papers scattered, and I bent down quickly to gather them. That's when I noticed the envelopes. Cream-colored, neatly stacked, and all addressed to Lily. Same handwriting. Same return address. No stamps. They weren't mailed. Someone had delivered them directly. I gathered them up quickly, said nothing, and slipped them into my bag while Lily was rounding up shoes. It wasn't suspicion, not yet. Just curiosity that felt too heavy to ignore. That night, after the kids were in bed and Lily was in the shower, I went to the garage, sat on the old workbench, and opened the first letter. The handwriting was precise, almost too careful, like the person writing had started and restarted more than once. It began casually, like something between old friends. But then the tone shifted. Talk of memories, references to moments I had never heard of, places I knew Lily had never mentioned. The next letter was worse. It wasn't about friendship. It was about longing. About waiting. About the time they had spent together during the afternoons when I thought she was volunteering at the school. One even thanked her for keeping things quiet, for protecting all three of them. 3. I felt my pulse go cold. The writer knew the kids' names, called them my little ones, mentioned how the youngest had started to look more like him than her. He talked about watching them from afar, how it crushed him not to be able to come inside and just sit at the dinner table once. How it hurt to see them play across the street and not be able to wave without causing suspicion. My chest went tight. I looked at the return address again. It wasn't a P.O. box. It was a street I knew well. Just across the street. I sat in the garage long after the last letter was read, hands trembling, the words burned into my memory like a brand. There was no way to misunderstand what I had seen. These were not friendly exchanges. These were love letters, soaked in longing and hidden in plain sight, passed through a grandmother's house like contraband, folded into quiet corners of domestic life I thought I understood. And the worst part, the very worst part, was how much sense it all made now. All those moments I had dismissed as quirks or harmless habits suddenly took on a whole new weight. The reason she never guarded her phone wasn't because there was nothing to hide, it was because the real betrayal wasn't digital. It was handwritten. It was old-fashioned. It was paper and pen, the one method no one thinks to trace anymore. I thought of the neighbor, how he looked at the kids, how he never smiled at me, how he went quiet and turned his head the day I waved. I had seen that look before, just never recognized it for what it was. Not envy. Not awkwardness. It was ownership. A quiet confidence. Like he already had what I thought was mine. I looked at the pictures on our walls differently now. Every framed moment of birthdays and holidays became a puzzle with missing pieces. I remembered the time our middle child got sick and Lily insisted only she could take care of him at her mom's house. Said it was easier, less stressful, more familiar. I'd believed it. Now I realized it had been a pattern, a loop that kept me out. I decided I couldn't carry this alone. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to get them from Lily. Not yet. I called her mother the next morning, told her I needed to talk, and drove over before I could change my mind. She opened the door already looking tired, like she had been expecting this moment. I sat down in her living room and asked her why. Why did she let it happen under her roof? Why did she protect her daughter knowing what it meant for me, for the children, for everything I had built with both hands and blind trust? She didn't deny it. She just closed her eyes, sighed like the weight of decades had landed on her chest, and began to talk. She said it started when Lily was struggling with the loneliness of early motherhood, when I was working long hours to keep the house running and the bills paid. Said she tried to tell Lily it was just a phase, that she had a good man who provided, who stayed faithful, who was building a future for them. But Lily felt unseen, bored, restless. She didn't want a divorce. She didn't want scandal. She wanted both lives, and somehow convinced herself she could have them. Her mother said the neighbor had been a mistake at first, something that spiraled too far. But then came the letters. She begged her mother not to judge. She said she loved the man, but loved me too, in a different way, in the way someone loves safety. Her mother cried as she said it, but I didn't feel anything. I just listened, numb. The part that broke me was when she said the kids might be his. She wasn't sure. Lily never took a test. Said it didn't matter because I was their real father in every way that counted. That phrase echoed in my mind, in every way that counted. I drove home in silence, the road a blur. I walked into the house and saw my son curled up on the couch, holding a toy I bought him last Christmas. My daughter ran up to me with a school paper in her hand, asking if I wanted to see her gold star. And I looked at her face, and suddenly I wasn't sure what I was seeing anymore. I had raised them. I had stayed up with them through colds and nightmares. I had taught them how to ride bikes, how to tie their shoes, how to tell the truth. But now the truth was something I couldn't explain, not to myself, and certainly not to them. I didn't know how to sit at the dinner table and look into eyes that might not carry a trace of me. I didn't know how to lay next to a woman who had built a second life while I was busy building the first. I didn't know how to move forward or even what forward looked like. I only knew that everything I believed about my family, my marriage, and my role as a father had been cracked open, and the pieces weren't falling back into place. Not yet. Not ever, maybe. I sat at the kitchen table with a pair of scissors, yesterday's newspapers, and 2 gossip magazines Lily had already skimmed through twice. The words came together slower than I thought, but I took my time. I used gloves. I used glue from the junk drawer she always said we needed to throw out. I shaped every sentence the way I knew would tug at her, the way he used to write in those letters I'd found. I made sure to include the phrases they liked, the sort of half-poetic nonsense about missing your smile and our quiet world. I added just enough warmth, just enough familiarity to make it believable. I even made a typo on purpose, left a few of the cuts uneven to match his style. Then I folded it and slipped it into the small box of papers at her mother's place, right beneath a stack of recipe cards. That was their system. She picked up the mail. Pretended it was for her mom. But the real messages were always buried somewhere in that house. Her mother was the postman and the vault. I had seen enough to know their rhythm. I gave it a week. Pretended nothing had changed. Took the trash out. Kissed her on the cheek. Watched her pretend not to check her phone even though the only thing on it lately were school reminders and coupon apps. I told her I had a work trip, 3 days, some logistics review in another state. She asked if it was mandatory. I said yes. She nodded, didn't ask twice. That was the first sign. Lily hated when I traveled. Said it messed up the kids' routine. But this time, she barely reacted. She even offered to pack my bag. I told her I'd handle it. When the morning came, I shaved, got dressed, kissed the kids goodbye, and pulled out of the driveway like any regular Tuesday. But I didn't head for the interstate. I looped around the neighborhood, parked behind an old row of hedges 3 blocks down, and waited. I had packed snacks, water, binoculars, and a change of clothes just in case I needed to blend in. The hours dragged, but I stayed patient. I knew her patterns. She'd wait until mid-morning, just after the mail came, just after she dropped the youngest off at preschool. I watched the house through the binoculars, scanning every window, every movement. At 11:17, the side gate opened and the neighbor walked out, dressed in jeans and a gray shirt I'd seen before. He didn't look around. Didn't hesitate. He moved across the lawn like he belonged there, like this wasn't his first visit and probably wouldn't be his last. He paused at the back door. She opened it before he knocked. They didn't even speak. He stepped inside like it was routine. Like I was the stranger now. My fingers tightened around the binoculars. I stayed there for another hour, watching shadows shift behind the curtains, movement upstairs, lights turning on in the hallway. At one point, I saw her silhouette pass in front of the living room window, laughing. That laugh used to be mine. Used to belong to the sound of us painting the nursery, dancing in the kitchen, staying up late watching old movies. I didn't move from my spot. I watched. I waited. I needed more than suspicion. I needed to see it. I needed to be sure. Because after everything, after the letters, the lies, the explanations that never came, I wanted this to be the final nail. I wanted to see what kind of man he was when he thought no one else was watching. And what kind of woman she had become behind the door I paid for, beneath the roof I had built over our heads. But what happened next wasn't what I expected. It was something much worse. I parked a block away, killed the engine, and walked the rest of the distance like a man delivering his own sentence. The air was still, unnaturally so, and the neighborhood was wrapped in that late afternoon calm where shadows begin to stretch and everything feels like it's holding its breath. I moved up the steps without a sound, turned the handle gently, and stepped into the house as if I were a ghost returning to a place he no longer belonged. The kids were in the living room, sprawled out with their crayons and building blocks, voices light and unaware, just 2 children playing on a quiet day. I crouched down, smiled, and told them we were playing a game, a surprise, that they had to be extra quiet. They giggled and nodded, and I walked past the kitchen, past the family photos still hanging like trophies of a story that never truly existed. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last. I already knew what I would find. Instinct had left no room for doubt. I had seen the letters, seen the way the neighbor looked at her, seen the small gestures between them when they thought no one was watching. But knowing and seeing are 2 different kinds of pain. I opened the bedroom door slowly, carefully, as if I were defusing something explosive. There they were. My bed, our bed, the one I bought when we first moved into this house, the one we chose together, the one I assembled myself with the instruction manual and a box of tools in my hand, and there they were, tangled in it like they had earned it. She looked up first. Her face twisted into shock, then panic, then silence. He looked like a man caught stealing from his own kitchen, eyes wide, face flushed, unsure if he should move or speak. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just looked him dead in the eye and told him to go home. That's all I said. Go home. He got dressed in silence, avoided looking at me, and slipped out without a word. Lily wrapped herself in the sheet like it could shield her from what had already been done. She tried to speak, but I raised my hand once and she stopped. I told her I had enough evidence, enough documentation, enough written proof, enough to take every square foot of this house, every account, every item with a receipt in my name. I reminded her this home, the mortgage, the land, it was all mine before she ever stepped through the door. She reached for something soft, tried to shift the conversation to the children, to what they meant to me, how they adored me, how I had been their father since the moment they could crawl. She said they loved me. She said they would be heartbroken. She said I couldn't just walk away. But I didn't respond. I walked out of the room, down the stairs, past the children still playing quietly, unaware of the final splinter cracking through the floorboards beneath our lives. I didn't look back. The next day I ordered the test. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about closure. It was about truth. Truth I could hold in my hands and file in a drawer if I had to. I waited 11 days. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, plain and clinical. I opened it in the car, parked outside the same grocery store where I used to push a cart while my son begged for cereal and my daughter pointed at every balloon near the checkout lane. The results were unambiguous. Probability of paternity, 0%. For both. Not mine. Neither of them. No mistake, no second test needed. I drove straight home, calm, controlled, like a man on his way to clear a room. I told her she had a few hours. No police, no court orders, no noise. Just time to pack, time to explain it however she wanted to them, time to leave quietly because a storm wasn't necessary when the war had already been lost. She didn't argue. Maybe she was tired. Maybe she already knew the ending. She took the kids, a few bags, and left. No screaming, no tears. Just the sound of the door closing, and the house going still. That was a year ago. Now I live in the same house, the one I paid for, the one I built a future in, now empty and echoing, but finally honest. I mow the lawn on weekends, repaint the trim when needed, keep everything in order like a man preserving a history he can no longer change. Sometimes I see them across the street, on the front lawn of the neighbor's house, laughing, playing, living. They don't wave. I don't expect them to. I watch for a moment, then go back inside. Because now I'm the man across the street, and that's all I ever really was.